Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I'm bringing you a spoiler-free review of the new release horror movie starring Nicolas Cage, Willy's Wonderland. So immediately following this brief, spoiler-free review, I've got an interview I did with the director, Kevin Lewis. There, we stay away from spoilers. There's maybe one that I bleep out, but we talk a little bit more about the movie, give a little more insight into the backstory of how this thing was made. So, Willy's Wonderland stars Nicolas Cage, and in this movie, he's fighting a bunch of animatronic monsters at Willy's Wonderland, which is the equivalent of a Chuck E. Cheese. Now, this is one of the hardest movies I've ever had to review, mainly because it's exactly what it sounds like. Nothing more and nothing less. And that's a good thing. It's rare that a movie delivers on its promise so well, and Willy's Wonderland definitely does that. So, what you get with this movie is an old school style drive-in horror movie that is a ton of fun. It's extremely self-aware and just does not ever, not for a moment, does it forget to be entertaining. Now, I'm gushing about this movie a little bit because it's a rarity. There are a lot of movies like this one. It's a very common lane to have sort of a low-budget monster movie with sort of a twist and a quirky thing, but very rarely do they work out. Willy's Wonderland works out. But I will say, if you're not the least bit interested in the concept, then this movie doesn't have much else going on in it for you. If you're interested in the concept at all, this is gonna be a good pick for you. If you like Nicolas Cage movies, this is one of the better ones he's done. In fact, this might be my favorite of his since Mandy. That movie's already a couple of years old. But amid all the stuff Nicolas Cage has been in over the last few years, Willy's Wonderland really does stand out. One of the fears I had going into this movie is that it is a good concept, and that it would not have delivered on that concept very well, because it is tricky that they would have half-assed some stuff or not really gone all the way, and I think that they went plenty far enough. In fact, I could have done with a little bit less exposition, but it's not as if Nicolas Cage spends an hour and 20 minutes poking around a spooky old building and then finally has a fight with one of these monsters. No, there are 8 of these things in this movie. 8, not 4, not 5. There are 8 different monsters in this one. They all have their own personality. Yes, they talk. Yes, they're creepy as hell. And yes, it is a ton of fun to watch Nicolas Cage rip into these things. Another example of them doing it right is they're real puppets. There's people and puppeteers operating them. They're real. They're not just CGI. That makes it work even better. And while they're naturally not the most menacing thing that you could imagine, they did a great job of adding just enough terror in the look of these things to make them look like they could have been something at like a kid's thing that are just tweaked a little bit to make them really terrifying. Really, just dark circles around the eyes and a couple of sharp teeth really set these monsters off. And if they look familiar, it's because the concept of this is clearly inspired by the popular video game Five Nights at Freddy's, but that's about where the comparison ends. Willy's Wonderland has kind of a flavor of its own. Most of that flavor brought to screen by Nicolas Cage. He's particularly good in this. There's a little thing that he does or doesn't do that I'm not going to go into in a spoiler-free review that I think really worked once I clued into what was going on with his character and what he was doing or not doing. I was like, okay, this is a little different. This isn't just your boilerplate, low-budget horror movie. And this is in a genre that I'm a fan of. I've got on this shirt. It's an Army of Darkness shirt. I just love fun, exciting horror movies that have a lot of blood and violence. There's quite a bit of sex in Willy's Wonderland, graphic sex if I'm being honest, but also graphic scenes of Nicolas Cage tearing apart a giant animatronic ostrich. And it's done in a way that's very, not just self-aware, but aware of the sort of subgenre that it's living in, and it embodies that really, really well. It's the type of movie that I would not only watch again with friends, it's the type of movie I would eagerly anticipate a sequel for, something that may or may not be happening and may or may not have been discussed in the interview that follows this review. But if you clicked on this review, there's a good chance you either like Nicolas Cage or 80s horror movies or anything of the sort. If you like anything like that, then Willy's Wonderland is going to be a good pick for you for a rental. It's not that often that I push something to say, yes, go ahead and spend $5 on it. Eventually, it will be available on streaming services, but there's been such a drought of stuff getting released. I do, in fact, recommend renting this if it sounds like your kind of thing. Because if it sounds like your kind of thing, even just a little bit, it's definitely your kind of thing. So with that, here is my brief interview with the director of Willy's Wonderland, Kevin Lewis. First question is icebreaker. Gun to your head, pressure situation. Favorite Nicolas Cage movie? And you're not allowed to say this one.
Vampire's Kiss.
Okay, really? What about that one? Is it just his performance in that?
Yeah, it's his performance, and it was one of my, I think it was written by the writer of After Hours, maybe even directed by, I don't know, but I love After Hours, and I just thought the script was really original, and he was just amazing in that movie. And I think it was one of my first Nick Cage movies I saw. I remember seeing it in college. And I was like, I love this guy, and I followed him ever since.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the weirder performances,
totally.
or at least as far as mainstream performances he's done, it's easily the weirdest one.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand?
I think it's a good example, though, of kind of how different he is in his acting style. It's like the best example. Sometimes he goes that way a little bit more subtly, and it's confusing to people. But that's one, if you don't get Nicolas Cage, you watch Vampires because you're like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing.
Totally.
So speaking of him, at what point did you get involved with Willy's Wonderland? Was he already attached? Were you involved with getting him attached? What's the story there?
So it's kind of a really cool story. So Jessica Davis, who plays Siren Sarah, she was in an acting class with Geo Parsons, who wrote the script. And she liked the script a lot, and she took it to her husband, Jeremy Daniel Davis. He's a producer, and he read it and he liked it. And I worked with Jeremy in the past, and so he brought me the script. And so I immediately loved it, when I read it, and just thought this would be a great movie to make. And so we basically got together, and we thought Nick was the perfect, the only one for it, really. And so, we got a casting director like you usually do, and you take it in, and we submitted it to his manager, Mike Nylon, and Mike liked it. And then about 3-4 days after Mike said he liked it, he gave it to Nick. Nick read it and liked it. I remember Nick said that he doesn't get scripts like this much anymore, or they don't make scripts like this much anymore, So that's kind of how it happened. And Nick was on it for almost a year before we started shooting.
Now I'm going to try something kind of unique here. I'm going to censor myself in the official video because I want to ask you a question, but I don't want to spoil this part of the movie.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'll bleep it, but I want to get an answer. So try to talk about it without saying it, and I'll bleep it if you have to say it.
Okay.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
So was that in the original script, or did that occur throughout the process before? Obviously before filming.
It was in the original script.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the reasons why he liked the project, because it was a challenge.
Yeah, he wanted to do. I could see that. My first, inclination was like, did Nicolas Cage want to do this movie so he didn't have to? But then, particularly the pinball machine scenes, you see, he wants to do this whole thing, because there were times, I don't want to go on about it because I don't want to spoil it, but there were times where I forgot that he wasn't, and I would remind myself and go, you know what, he has not.
Yeah, that's cool though.
You really do forget. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I really wanted to harken back to the days when I grew up in the 80s, and especially I went to Showbiz Pizza a lot, with the birthday parties.
Yeah, it was still around when I was a kid, but not for long.
Yeah, man, the rocket fire explosion and everything. And when we did the pitch, it was Nick Cage versus Chuck E. Cheese. Who doesn't want to see that movie? But it's a very gonzo, check your mind at the door type movie. We could go on and on about what the janitor represents and live and everything, and there's things, but at the end of the day, it's a fun movie, and it harks back to the 80s movies that I grew up with, like Return of the Living Dead and Evil Dead, which Sam Raimi's my favorite filmmaker. And I wanted to make a fun movie like that. And I think now, especially with the times that we're going through with the pandemic and the political landscape, like it's like the perfect movie, just to have fun, That's it. Well, that's
right.
what we did it
Well,
for.
and you mentioned Evil Dead. I've even got my Army of Darkness shirt on for this interview. I would put it more in line with Army of Darkness because even though there are some frightening sequences, it is more in the fun direction, whereas Evil Dead was, you're still figuring it out. By the time they get to Army of Darkness, they kind of figured out like, oh, we just want to make this really like a fun haunted house kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
This is a weird question. It's not a weird question. I had trouble writing this question in a way that makes sense, but were there any, obviously there's a lot of hurdles when you make a movie, but were there any in terms of how to make this concept work? Were there any weird things that you had to kind of overcome either in the pre-production stage or while you were filming? We're like, how do we do that? Or how do we make a certain part of this kind of weird, wacky thing work?
Well, the whole idea was we got to get the creatures done right. So Ken Hall was amazing. He did he created all the creatures, and there were 7 of them. There's 8 of them total, and then there's 7 suits and 1 puppet for Ozzy. But that was very key, and the key of the eyes, blinking, and the mouths. Because if you go to Chuck E. Cheese, like that's what you see, right? The servos. And so he put pulleys inside the suits. There were stunt men and women in the suits, and they would move the pulleys and they would move the eyes and the mouth. That was very important. And then in terms of the production design, making this place feel real. Molly Coffey was the production designer, and she did a fantastic job. And we shot pretty much all Willys on a soundstage. So we built those sets, and that was a big thing. Is like we wanted to be able to move the camera a lot of different ways, and because of things in the movie, like we talked about with Nick and stuff like that. It's like, how do you make that visually interesting? So we would be able to move the walls and be able to place the camera there and things like that. I didn't want to be. One of my worst fears was we'd have to go to like an old defunct Chuck E. Cheese location and shoot there, because it's just a big space. Like you know what I mean? Like you can't really move around, And so so that was I was glad that we got to build the sets. That was the only way I saw this movie really happening, the way I envisioned it.
It's exactly what it says it is, and it all comes together, and it does feel like I'm watching something from like Monster Vision. Like I can see Joe Bob Briggs introducing it. Cool. It's that type of
That's great.
It's that type of thing. It's and there's maybe a couple of good movies like that come out every year. I'd say by the end of 2021, this will probably be one of them.
That'd be amazing.
Even though you can kind of see some of the budget restraints, it's much more satisfying than some of the biggest stuff that comes out in movie theaters to me. And a good testament to that specifically with this movie is that my wife liked it, and
that's great.
She's not really she's a good sport. She watches a lot of stuff with me. Yeah. This genre is not really in her lane at all. So I was kind of like, are you sure you want to watch this with me? And she sat and watched it. She was doing something, and this is the best testament I got for it. She was doing something, saw that I was watching it, and after about 10 minutes came over and watched the whole thing with me. So that's awesome. For somebody that doesn't, it's hard for me to recommend something a little stronger than that. For somebody that doesn't really like stuff like that to have enjoyed it. So
exactly. We're very self-aware of what we are,
100%. I said that exact word. I know we were wrapping up, but I said that exact phrase to my wife 5 minutes in. I was like, this is what self-aware looks like. I explained it to her. I used this to explain it to her. I was like, this is what self-aware is. Nice. When they're not, you can tell, and it does not work. Willy's Wonderland is definitely self-aware. So good on you for that.
Great. Okay.
All right, Kevin. Again, good talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Absolutely, man. You take care. All right. Stay safe. Okay.
All right. I will. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, buddy.
So I hope you enjoyed another one of these videos. I'm doing them sort of as projects I'm interested in come out. Willy's Wonderland was definitely that type of project. Let me know what you think of Willy's Wonderland, whether you've seen it or not, in the comments below. But I will keep making these types of videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this Willy's Wonderland episode, and you will see me on the next one.